Good afternoon. I'm Phyllis Thompson. I'm an associate professor in English and a member of the Women's Studies Steering Committee. Along with my colleague, Jill Leroy Frazier, I want to welcome you to our 10th annual Notable Women celebration this evening. With this marking Women's Studies' 10th annual celebration, and with our university's centennial this year, I find it fitting that this year's recipients are truly distinguished in the ways that they've both contributed to women's lives in our community, as well as forged paths along which others can follow. I have the distinct honor of introducing to you Professor Kathleen Higginson Grover. Kathleen has taught on the faculty in English since 1976 and was recently recognized for 35 years of dedication and service to ETSU. That was this past week. She's taught a broad spectrum of courses for us in the English department, from critical thinking and argumentation to surveys on American literature to classes on literature, ethics, and values, and her always popular among ETSU students class on popular culture, her animals and literature class. Additionally, she's been recognized 3 times in Who's Who among America's teachers. In addition to a heavy teaching load, Professor Grover has presented papers on community in Appalachia, on allegory and insights in Edwin Abbott's Flatland, and humanity in the poems and personae of Maggie Anderson at professional conferences around the Southeast. Her publication builds on these themes as well. Her essays explore themes of Appalachia, of moral choices in public and private lives. So as you can see, the matters of ethics, value, choice, voice, community, insight, and Appalachia matter to Professor Grover and are infused into her teaching and her writing lives. These matters also fill her active community life and characterize her loyalty, dedication, and commitment to ETSU in the Tri-Cities region. Professor Grover, for instance, has been a long-term member on the Faculty Senate at ETSU and has acted as its secretary for 7 years. Her knowledge of departmental culture, as well as her institutional memory, has served us all well as she has acted on our behalf. A colleague of hers on the Senate writes that, and this is a quote, "As secretary, Professor Grover is much more than the memory and history taker of the Senate. She's always well informed about issues we consider and is assertive in our discussions and deliberations. Strong personalities are to be found on the Senate, and especially on the Executive Committee. And Ms. Grover, she holds her own with all of them by kindly stating her views and always holding her ground. She has been a vital contributor to the development of shared governance at ETSU through her diligent work and ability to collaborate with faculty, staff, administrators, and students," end quote. Professor Grover has not only been a voice for faculty interests, but has also been a strong liaison between campus and community. Of Professor Grover, another one of her colleagues writes that, "We all understand the important role that media plays in the lives of underrepresented persons, especially those native to Appalachia, and how access to radio, either as listener or performer, can be empowering. Professor Grover was compelled to secure pledges so that WETS operated as a partnership between ETSU and the station's listeners, and received funding for a digital transmitter which would return the station's traditional programming of music, an essential part of our region's culture, back to the air." When I think of Professor Grover, the Margaret Mead quotation enters my mind, "Never a doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has." Instead of sitting at home listening to talk radio, She left her home and changed her community for the better. Her efforts restored a beloved service to the community. Her passion and persuasion ignited enough like-minded individuals to join her in pledging their support to WETS. Maybe she didn't stop mountaintop removal or chain herself to a bulldozer for the construction of a nuclear plant, but Professor Grover's example illuminates how one person's small act can swell into a great and valuable outcome for her community. Ms. Grover's act illuminates the path for us all. The ETSU Notable Woman is notable because she transforms lives, affects real change in the community, and provides a path on which the rest of us can follow. Professor Kathleen Grover has done just that. With 35 years of service, her abiding humility, and the effect her work has had on ETSU and the surrounding community, she fulfills, and then some, the criteria of the ETSU Women's Studies Notable Woman. Please join me in congratulating my dear friend and colleague, Professor Kathleen Higginson Grover, on being named ETSU's Notable Woman.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for coming here this afternoon. Thanks also to those who nominated Dr. Tedesco and me, and to the Women's Studies Steering Committee for this great honor. It is a special privilege to join the amazing notable women from the past decade and to share the celebration with Marie Tedesco, a respected colleague and dear friend. We didn't read each other's papers. I appreciate not only the recognition of today, but the opportunity to look back, to get an overview of my life so far. My first realization when Dr. Shaka, Director of Women's Studies, suggested I explain how I got to be who and where I am was not without the support and encouragement of those who have shared the journey with me. When Steve Jobs died recently and his 2005 commencement speech at Stanford gained circulation, his words resonated. Quoting the back cover of the Whole Earth catalog's last issue from the mid-1970s, he urged, "Stay hungry, stay foolish." At every stage of my life, I have stayed hungry and foolish, sometimes to my chagrin. But my experiences have taught me another principle Jobs' later years exemplified, though he did not say it. Share. The people I have been privileged to share my journey with have, as Robert Frost says in The Road Not Taken, made all the difference. My first lessons in hunger, foolishness, and sharing began as lessons do for most of us, with my birth family, whom I recognize today by having my maiden name included in the celebration. My story is typical for most of us who become English majors. Parents who read avidly read to us their children. My engineer father, whom I came to realize was actually a closet literature teacher himself, recited Rudyard Kipling to me, showing that words can be music, even when I didn't understand many of them. When I turned our backyard into Oz and acted out Dorothy's adventures with the Tin Man, Scarecrow, and Cowardly Lion, they tolerated what the neighbors surely thought was foolishness. When I adopted a menu of goat's milk and cheese to emulate Heidi, they did their best to oblige me for the few weeks it took me to realize I actually miss veggies. And my parents gifted me with 3 brothers, with and from whom I learned to share. David, the one closest to me in age, was my boon companion, and in many ways my best teacher. Because he so obviously had a heart, a brain, and courage, he could play just about any role in our childhood fantasies. Of course, many fine teachers generously shared the world of learning with me. In college and graduate school especially, I came to appreciate the power of literature to open up new worlds and to help us understand the messy world we live in. The authors they introduced have become lifelong friends who increase my wonder at our human species and at all of life. From Homer to Dante to John Keats to Emily Dickinson to Billy Collins, they continually draw me into the magic of words to tell stories and create music. I must not omit the contributions of other students to my learning process, from high school classmates who translated the Aeneid with me to those in college who shared puzzlement over T.S. Eliot and Ezra Pound. A special mention, not so complimentary, goes to the young man in a Victorian literature seminar at UT in Knoxville. We get some things from people who don't treat us well. After a discussion about Robert Browning's monologues I must have gushed over, I was a nerdy student, he said as we left class, "Do you know what your problem is? You're just too damned enthusiastic." Yes, I was taken aback. After a few days of skulking around embarrassed, however, I decided to embrace what he obviously considered a fault, foolish enthusiasm. After all, if Emily Dickinson could declare, "Inebriate of air am I," why couldn't I give in to the intoxication of poetry? In my professional life, I value communities to be part of and to share with. Students in my classes and in various groups on campus are a special delight and resource. They share with us as much as we teachers share with them. In classes, they continually amaze me with their initiative, hard work, and insights. They make every day an adventure, feeding my hunger to see minds at work. In many classes, in addition to the usual discussions, papers, and tests, my students keep reading journals in which they record their experiences with and reactions to the literature we study. Some passages in the journals are poignant as young people apply the insights they get from readings to their own lives. Ideas about objectification of women in The Handmaid's Tale, for example, to a painful relationship. Others bring belly laughs as a student rants about Achilles' immaturity or another complains about the tedium of reading anything. These journals contain gems that remind me why I love what I do. I'll share just one example whose author has given me permission to use. About Dante's Inferno, Lindsay Carmen, who has come today, wrote, "My favorite circle of sinners in hell is the flatterers. What made it even funnier was I read it to my mom, and she jokingly said she knew someone who would end up in that circle. When she said who it was, I laughed the same person. I felt kind of bad, but I got over it quickly. I read the parts of Sowers of Discords to my parents. My dad loved it. We ended up having a long discussion about sin and heaven and hell. My dad's an ordained pastor and Christian counselor, and we compared and contrasted aspects of the Bible with Dante. We also joked around and tried to gross my mom out with being graphic and talking about gruesome punishments. Dante, bringing families together since 1321. Thank you, Lindsay. Thanks also to all the other students who have enlightened and entertained me with their journal writing. You know who you are. ETSU students also amaze me with their talents in music, art, and drama as I indulge my passion for these expressions of creativity. Slocum and Tipton Galleries, the Reese Museum, student concerts and recitals assure me that our students are already making their marks on the world and give me hope for the future. From among the artists, I have selected a favorite few works that enrich my life daily. Some paintings are by Megan Levacy, a former student and now friend. I struggle with the impulse to buy at nearly every show. I find I win even when I lose. But artistry isn't limited to our students. ETSU brings us productions of world renown through the Mary B. Martin School of the Arts, and faculty in music, art, drama, and literature keep a steady stream of entertainment coming our way. As they share their talents, I am happy to share my support. For me, being part of ETSU's community includes belonging to a superb department, literature and language, whose faculty share enthusiasm, similar goals, and incredible abilities. It means being part of the College of Arts and Sciences, which proudly provides basic courses for all disciplines, in addition to about 20 majors, several centers of excellence, and many interdisciplinary studies. It means seeing the university as a community in itself, with shared goals and responsibilities. I'm sorry, but I'm sort of repeating some of what you said about me, Dr. Thompson, because it was my chance to tell my autobiography, and I seized it. I responded to this view by representing the college in ETSU's Faculty Senate for 9 years, serving as secretary for 7. Believe me, there were times when I spent 10 hours writing and typing minutes that I considered that devotion to be foolish. But I was passionate about doing my part to contribute to shared governance and obtaining for faculty a full voice in the affairs of ETSU. I did not read Dr. Thompson's statements. Thankfully, our administration has worked with faculty towards these ends. Such initiatives as pay equity and improving salaries continue to strengthen our community. It has been an honor to be part of this growing strength. In the Senate, I made lifelong friends whom I treasure. But ETSU is part of a still larger community that rewards participation. It's great public radio station. I swear I didn't read her statements. WETS a few years ago tried specializing in news and commentary after floundering at trying to be all things to all listeners, a little classical music, a little Americana, news, and commentary. Many stations across the country successfully converted to mostly talk, but here the change created a bitter backlash that saddened me. I saw letters to the editor and petitions of anger and outrage from some, support for the change from others. My familiarity with HD radio from the first station in the country to use it, WUSF in Tampa, seemed to provide a solution. With HD, a station can stream several different channels simultaneously, as many as 7 with enough resources. Would listeners support a proposal for HD? Could station staff accept the added responsibility for all of them? Could the community afford it in an era of downsizing? Frankly, I felt even more foolish in daring to write a letter to the local paper with a proposal than I did when that cynic chided me for enthusiasm in grad school. I thought about it for days, but then I did it. Readers and listeners responded. WETS got a grant to pay for most of the transmitter, and generous listeners made up the difference. And WETS HD went on the air this past month in October. After a few rough patches to be anticipated in anything new, I can listen to classical music on WETS HD3 while my neighbor listens to bluegrass or other Americana on WETS HD2, and a news hound sniffs up the latest happenings on WETS HD1. Score 1 for foolish enthusiasm. And again, as Margaret Mead wrote, our officers are joining each other. I think some things come by osmosis. I don't know. I think it's worth hearing again. I really do. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. How lovely to be a part of a group that strengthens the radio voice of ETSU for still larger audiences. I promise I won't go on forever discussing the opportunities for enthusiasm, sharing, and foolishness I found here at ETSU. I am the region, but I do want to mention a few more, the larger communities of music, literature, and art. Sometimes I felt as if I were writing a travelogue here. Johnson City teams with artists and galleries. I also enjoy the music provided by regional orchestras and local venues. We have the Johnson City Symphony Orchestra, the Symphony of the Mountains, and Doc Watson at the Down Home, or Michael Cody at the Acoustic Coffee House. The Johnson City Community and Jonesboro Repertory Theaters schedule entertaining plays, often performing on a professional level. In literature, the first art I ever loved abounds. In the Department of Literature and Language, we have nationally known poet Don Johnson, rising poet Jesse Graves, and others too numerous to name, writing their own poems and stories. We have scholars sharing their insights into literature, both old and new. The Mary B. Martin School of the Arts is bringing poet Ron Resch to campus in the spring, in addition to sponsoring musical events and films. The Wayne Basler Chair, supporting the integration of arts and sciences, brought Liza Author here back home from Vermont for a semester. Author's sixth novel, Washed in the Blood, was published just last month, and she's been in the area for readings. I agree with reviewers who say Washed in the Blood is her best work yet. Nearby, Emory and Henry College presents an astounding literary festival each fall, bringing one author to campus for intensive scholarship, readings, and interviews. Author was a featured author the year after she held the Basler Chair, and Barbara Kingsolver was celebrated this year. The festivals stimulate and nurture interest in Appalachian literature. My point is that, for a hungry and foolish person, opportunities to indulge are everywhere. Discovering them has enriched my life. Sharing them with the many special people going my way has, as I said at the beginning, quoting Frost, made all the difference. Thank you for sharing this special part of my journey in this afternoon's celebration. May your own journeys be as rewarding for you as mine has been for me.